At dawn on June 6, 1944, more than 150,000 Allied soldiers moved toward the coast of Normandy. They knew the odds. They knew many would not survive the first hour. But there was no turning back. If this invasion failed, Western Europe would remain under Nazi control, and the war could be lost. For months, the Allies had planned in complete secrecy, assembling the largest invasion force the world had ever seen. This single day would decide the future of Europe and change the course of World War II forever. This is D-Day, the Normandy Landings. By 1944, World War II had entered a critical stage. Nazi Germany still controlled most of Western Europe. France, Belgium, and the Netherlands remained under German occupation. Although the Allies were fighting on multiple fronts, there was no direct land invasion against Germany from the west. The Soviet Union was carrying the main burden of ground fighting in Eastern Europe. Soviet leaders demanded that the Allies open a second front in the west to reduce pressure on their forces. For the Allied leaders, this became both a military and political necessity. The United States and Great Britain agreed that only a full-scale invasion of Western Europe could defeat Germany. Air bombing alone was not enough. The Allies needed boots on the ground to push German forces back and liberate occupied countries. France was chosen as the invasion point. Its coastline faced Britain directly, making it possible to transport large numbers of troops across the English Channel. However, landing an army on a heavily defended coastline was one of the most dangerous operations imaginable. Germany had spent years building coastal defenses known as the Atlantic Wall. This included bunkers, mines, artillery positions, and obstacles designed to stop landing craft. German commanders believed an Allied invasion was coming, but they were not sure where. The logical invasion point appeared to be Pas de Calais, the closest point between Britain and France. For this reason, German defenses were strongest there. Normandy, while still well defended, was less heavily fortified. Allied leaders knew that success depended on surprise, planning, and overwhelming force. A failed landing would be catastrophic. Thousands of lives could be lost, and the war could be delayed for years. Preparation for the invasion took months. Millions of soldiers, vehicles, ships, and aircraft were moved into Britain. Everything had to be coordinated perfectly. Timing, weather, and secrecy were critical. The operation was named Operation Overlord. Its opening day would become known as D-Day. By early June 1944, everything was ready. The fate of Europe now depended on what would happen next. Operation Overlord was the most complex military operation of World War II. It required careful planning, coordination between nations, and absolute secrecy. The Allies knew that even a small mistake could lead to failure. The invasion force included soldiers from the United States, Great Britain, Canada, and other Allied nations. Millions of troops were trained in Britain for amphibious landings, urban combat, and coordination with air and naval forces. New landing craft were built specifically for this operation. Allied planners divided the Normandy coastline into 5 landing zones. 2 would be attacked by American forces, 2 by British forces, and 1 by Canadian troops. Each beach had different terrain, defenses, and challenges. Air power played a critical role in the plan. Allied aircraft were tasked with destroying German transportation networks, bridges, railroads, and communication lines. This would slow German reinforcements once the invasion began. Paratroopers were also included in the plan. Thousands of Allied airborne troops would land behind enemy lines during the night before D-Day. Their mission was to secure key roads, destroy bridges, and create confusion among German forces. Secrecy was essential. The Allies launched a large deception campaign to mislead Germany about where and when the invasion would happen. Fake armies, false radio signals, and controlled intelligence leaks were used to convince German commanders that the invasion would happen at Pas de Calais, not Normandy. Weather was another critical factor. The invasion required calm seas, low tides at the right time, and enough moonlight for airborne operations. Poor weather could sink landing craft, scatter paratroopers, and delay air support. As the planned invasion date approached in early June 1944, bad weather threatened to cancel everything. Allied leaders faced a difficult decision: delay the invasion and risk discovery, or move forward despite the risks. After reviewing weather reports, the Supreme Allied Commander, General Dwight D. Eisenhower, made the final decision. He gave the order to proceed. The invasion was set for the early morning of June 6, 1944. All across southern England, soldiers boarded ships and prepared for the crossing. Many of them knew this could be the most dangerous day of their lives. Operation Overlord was about to begin. On the night of June 5, 1944, the operation entered its most dangerous phase. As Allied ships crossed the English Channel, thousands of airborne troops prepared to jump behind enemy lines. American paratroopers from the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions were assigned to land west of the invasion beaches. Their mission was to secure key roads, bridges, and exits from the beaches. These exits were critical for moving troops and equipment inland after the landing. British and Canadian airborne forces were tasked with securing areas east of the landing zone. Their objectives included capturing bridges, destroying German artillery positions, and preventing enemy reinforcements from reaching the beaches. Just after midnight, aircraft carrying paratroopers crossed the French coast. Heavy anti-aircraft fire filled the sky. Many planes were hit, and pilots were forced to change course suddenly. As a result, paratroopers were scattered far from their planned drop zones. Despite the chaos, many airborne troops adapted quickly. Small groups formed on the ground and continued their missions. Even isolated soldiers attacked German positions, cut communication lines, and blocked roads. Their actions created confusion among German commanders. Some objectives were achieved exactly as planned. British airborne forces successfully captured key bridges, including one that later became known as Pegasus Bridge. Holding these bridges was critical to protecting the flank of the invasion. American paratroopers faced difficult conditions in flooded fields, hedgerows, and darkness. Many drowned in water-filled areas. Others spent hours evading German patrols before finding their units. Although the airborne landings were disorganized, they achieved their main purpose. German forces were confused about the scale and direction of the invasion. They received reports of fighting across a wide area and could not determine where the main attack would come. As dawn approached, German commanders were still unsure whether Normandy was the main invasion or a diversion. This uncertainty slowed their response and worked in the Allies' favor. While the airborne troops fought inland, the main invasion force approached the coast. Thousands of ships filled the sea. Battleships, cruisers, and destroyers moved into position to support the landings. The largest amphibious assault in history was only hours away. At dawn on June 6, 1944, Allied naval forces opened fire along the Normandy coast. Battleships and cruisers bombarded German positions, aiming to destroy bunkers, artillery, and defenses overlooking the beaches. Soon after, the first landing craft moved toward shore. Thousands of soldiers were packed tightly inside, heading toward heavily defended beaches under enemy fire. The sea was rough, and many units became disorganized even before reaching land. The landings were spread across 5 main beaches. Each beach presented different conditions and challenges. At Utah Beach, American forces landed farther from their intended target due to strong currents. However, this unexpected landing position faced lighter resistance. American commanders quickly adapted, and U.S. troops secured the beach with fewer casualties than expected. At Omaha Beach, the situation was far more dangerous. German defenses were strong and well-positioned on high ground. As landing ramps dropped, American soldiers were met with intense machine gun and artillery fire. Many landing craft were destroyed before reaching shore. Troops at Omaha faced heavy losses. Movement off the beach was slow, and units were scattered. Leadership at small unit level became critical. Groups of soldiers took cover, regrouped, and began attacking German positions one by one. Naval gunfire and aircraft support eventually helped weaken the defenses. British and Canadian forces landed at Gold Juno and Sword beaches. Resistance varied, but overall progress was steady. Despite obstacles and casualties, Allied troops pushed inland and began securing key objectives. German defenders fought hard, but they faced overwhelming numbers. Communication problems and confusion slowed German responses. Many units waited for orders that never came, uncertain whether Normandy was the main invasion or a diversion. By mid-morning, Allied forces had established footholds on all 5 beaches. Although casualties were heavy, especially at Omaha, the invasion had not been driven back into the sea. D-Day was far from over, but the hardest step had been taken. Allied troops were now on the beaches of Normandy. The outcome of the war in Western Europe now depended on whether they could hold and expand these positions. After the initial landings on D-Day, the Allies faced their next major challenge, moving off the beaches and pushing inland. Landing on the coast was only the first step. Holding the ground and expanding the foothold would decide whether the invasion succeeded or failed. In the hours after the landings, Allied engineers worked to clear obstacles, mines, and wrecked vehicles from the beaches. Temporary roads were built, and supplies began to flow ashore. Tanks, artillery, and additional troops were unloaded despite ongoing danger from enemy fire. American forces at Omaha Beach slowly pushed forward. Small units advanced through gaps in German defenses, often climbing steep terrain under fire. Once higher ground was secured, German positions overlooking the beach became vulnerable and were gradually neutralized. At Utah Beach, American paratroopers linked up with landing forces. This connection helped secure important roads and allowed U.S. troops to move inland more quickly. The lighter resistance in this sector gave the Allies early momentum. British and Canadian forces also advanced from their beaches. However, progress was slower than expected in some areas. German defenses were stubborn, and the terrain made movement difficult. The Norman countryside was filled with hedgerows, thick, earth-covered walls that created natural defensive positions. These hedgerows turned every field into a potential battlefield. German troops used them to set up ambushes and slow Allied advances. Tanks had difficulty moving through this terrain, and close combat became common. German forces attempted counterattacks to push the Allies back into the sea. However, lack of coordination and delays prevented a full-scale response. Many German commanders were still waiting for orders from higher command, which slowed their reaction during the critical early days. One of the most important Allied advantages was air superiority. Allied aircraft attacked German reinforcements, supply routes, and communication lines. This made it difficult for Germany to move troops quickly or launch large counteroffensives. As the days passed, the Allies continued expanding their positions. Although progress was slow and casualties continued, the beachheads became more secure. The Germans had failed in their main objective, to stop the invasion at the shoreline. By the end of the first week, Allied forces had established a solid foothold in Normandy. The success of D-Day had opened the door for further operations in Western Europe. The invasion had survived its most dangerous phase. Now, the real battle for France was beginning. The success of D-Day marked a turning point in World War II. For the first time, the Allies had established a permanent foothold in Western Europe. Nazi Germany now faced a powerful enemy advancing from the west, while continuing to fight the Soviet Union in the east. After securing the Normandy beachheads, the Allies began bringing massive numbers of troops, vehicles, and supplies into France. Artificial harbors, known as mulberry harbors, were constructed to support the invasion. These allowed the Allies to unload equipment even without capturing a major port. German forces attempted to contain the invasion, but the scale of Allied resources made this difficult. Allied air power dominated the skies, destroying bridges, railways, and supply lines. German reinforcements moved slowly and often arrived too late to change the situation. Fighting in Normandy continued for weeks. Progress inland was slow and costly, especially in the hedgerow countryside. However, the Allies maintained constant pressure. In July 1944, a major breakout operation allowed Allied forces to push beyond Normandy and advance rapidly across France. The liberation of Paris followed soon after. As Allied armies advanced eastward, German forces were pushed back toward their own borders. The invasion of Normandy had succeeded in opening a full Western front. D-Day also changed the strategic balance of the war. Germany was now fighting a two-front war it could not win. Resources were stretched thin, and German command decisions became increasingly desperate. The loss of control in Western Europe accelerated Germany's defeat. For the soldiers who fought on June 6, 1944, D-Day was one of the most intense and dangerous days of the war. Thousands were killed or wounded, but their actions made the liberation of Europe possible. The landings required courage, coordination, and sacrifice on an enormous scale. Historians consider D-Day one of the most important military operations in history. It demonstrated the power of international cooperation, careful planning, and overwhelming force. Without the success of the Normandy landings, the war in Europe could have continued for years. D-Day did not end the war, but it made victory possible. It began the final chapter of World War II in Europe.